And here we go, a lapse in training. All right, so you ready? Let's go. One thing that should be stressed here is that the new gods had only their training from Hercules and Hydria. Now the training for the most part was sound and designed to change perceptions of the new gods from those of a spirit to those of a god. The training also went over the basic needs of a person: food, water, clothing, sleep, and shelter. With these, a person could survive and grow. What was lacking in this training was supplementary needs: the drive to be creative and to adapt and overcome adversity, the ability to think on their feet and create growth through innovation, the needs of communication both locally and over long distances. Finally, the ability to function whether their gods were present or away. The new gods, in a desire to understand the problems of their people, were holding things close and focused on the basic needs. Well, this would be fine in the initial stages, but people needed to grow. The gods being so close and controlling made things difficult for real progress to, progress. In all these troubles, there was one simple problem that superseded them all. The people didn't see their gods as gods. Sure, some gave reverence out of thanks for blessings given, but the gods didn't act like gods. They acted more like glorious friends and leaders. They gave without asking, and in doing so, received little in return. Along with love, a god requires a certain amount of fear of themselves. This is what makes people revere their gods. The fact that the gods could harm them if they got out of line made them desirous of keeping in their god's favor. Eventually, people would hold them in disdain and rise up against them. Seeing them as powerful but impotent, they may hold them in contempt over time. Kieran, during a time as overgod, had inspired fear. She didn't know how to inspire a love that she felt devoid of. It mattered not to her if she was loved. As long as she was feared, she was content. Of all the gods, Dawn was closest to what a god was imagined to be like. They had seen his wrath and understood to keep him happy. Very had seemed lazy. Ash was arrogant and self-serving. Peter was too trusting, as Dionysus had shown him. Only when Peter had seen the deceit of his scientist did he prove he could be angry. Gary and Gladys were benevolent to a fault. Gary worried over every little setback, and Gladys was too laid back for her people's liking. Well, they realized she was there to assist them. It never seemed as if she was really in charge or even interested. She'd wander around and pat people on the back, but she never directed them. All in all, it made for an uncomfortable relationship between the gods and their charges. Now, I'm going to go on with Don with his return, because that was pretty quick. So let's go a little bit farther and see how Don does with his. Kieran kind of kicked him in the ass and said, well, you got to make sure everybody else is doing good. So let's see what he does. Don returned to find that in his absence 50 years had transpired on Earth, God time being different than human time. He also found to his disgust that his people had not progressed at all. He stomped around and roared at them for being no further forward. A man who had more courage than the rest approached him. But God, you gave us no instructions when you left. We feared to incur your displeasure, so we continued as you instructed us. You've always been in control of our progress, and we were not allowed to try new things. Anyone else would have seen that they were holding their reins too tight and not giving their people the incentive to think on their own. Don was not one of those people. Checking the progress schedule, he found them now behind, and it would only get worse if he didn't get them on the ball. He gathered each vocation and berated them. Hell, do I have to do all your thinking for you? We worked out the bare minimum people for each section to work with. Those who were overflowing made specialists whose task was to make the work more efficient, to come up with innovations to speed up the processes. Well, I expect you to improvise. Try anything until you figure out what works. One of the new specialists looked at one of the others. Oh, can we seek assistance from those who specialize in other areas? Don smote himself on the forehead. Well, why would you want to do that? What does someone who knows about farming understand about building? The man looked nervous but persisted. true God, but they do understand about what they know. Don approached the man quickly. You stick to things you know and let others stick to what they know. Now move, and I expect quick results. Don spoke to each group of specialists in turn with a strict admonition that they were to work on their own, not bother the other specialists. He felt that any interference or communication would slow down advancement. Had Don had any actual leadership in his history, he would have known that the opposite was true. He went to his penthouse to work out projections on what advances he could expect, when and what they would lead to for later. Turning in his chair, he watched as the farming specialists were examining the processes and talking to those who performed the tasks. He watched as they drew in the dirt and added or subtracted based on the information they received. Karen was watching the plant's progress with growing unease. These spirits were becoming better gods than the originals. Despite everything she had done from the beginning, they were succeeding. Karen was surprised that the spirits she had created were somehow being reformed, enhanced, and purified in contact with these gods. Don was the only god who was working up to her expectations. His theory was still behind the power curve. She had sent him out to place after place to screw things up, but it wasn't doing any good. She decided to press him harder, and he needed some reason to remain determined. She had offered him something that would drive him to more desperate action. She caused Don to become sleepy. He slowly closed his eyes and laid his head on his desk. Karen entered his dreams dressed in the familiar dark hooded robe with light streaming behind her. In his dream, Don was kneeling and bowing. My servant, you alone are progressing as I desire. The other gods waste their time in visiting other gods and seeking to gain knowledge. I've given you and you alone the road map to success. They're causing us to fail, and when we do, it is Fred who will bear the brunt of our displeasure. You must not fail to bring these other gods in line. If you succeed, you will become an overgod with powers you have never dreamed of. You will have dominion over not one small significant place on a planet, but over thousands of planets and the gods of those planets. You enjoy the power that comes from the reverence of thousands of gods. In his sleep, a broad smile creased Don's lips. Well, she had him now. Now to give him a task. Your people become masters of the sea. You will teach them to build mighty ships, teach them the ways of ballistics and to create cannons. You will stop this mingling of people and keep them in their own lands where they belong. Do not fail in this task, for if you succeed, your reward will be great. But if you fail, your reward will be... She caused a vision of him flailing around through 1,000 torments. He was a small insect that children burnt with sunlight through a magnifying glass. He was stepped on and ground to dust, his body cast into a pit of fire and was to be forever roasted. Okay, where am I? Oh, while beasts bit into his flesh, which regrew and then roasted, he gave off a savory scent. In his sleep, Don writhed and sweat poured from every pore. He cried out and woke in terror. A voice in his head reminded him of his duty and his task. The builders were wandering around looking at likely materials that could be adapted, what benefits could be derived from their use, and how these could be attached to other things. They would get excited as each new material was broken apart and each part tested. Don then assigned a specialist group into the creation of metal. He showed them where to dig or chip at the walls of certain caves to gain iron ore. Well, what he didn't tell them, or possibly didn't know himself, was how to add coal to iron to make steel. Once they had the iron, they were confused as to how to manipulate it. They tried pounding on it, soaking it, throwing it, even gnawing on it without it changing in the least. Don watched the progress and became frustrated. Popping before them, he told them to just melt it. Pop back before telling them how. Had they been able to talk to the other specialists, they would have found the answer with the builders. Ted was a builder who was trying to work out the best use of all the mud at the river's edge. He realized it could be molded into any shape he wanted. could be dried and could be used to hold things as long as they were dry. What he didn't like was that it cracked as it dried. He had a large collection of clay on the ground when one of the farmers passed with a selection of dried stems. He had cut them so they would fit, laying in stones some leaves for easier carrying. As he passed, a great many of the stems fell into the clay and were incorporated. Then formed them into small cubes and let them to dry by a fire. Later, when he came to examine them, he found them changed. The addition of the stalks had made them light and a lot stronger. He began to experiment with them, and one of the first things he built was an oven. He begged more straw from the farmers, who were happily willing to give him all he wanted. Ted went to the carpenter, asked for some molds to make bricks faster. The carpenter wanted some of the bricks to create a box to steam wood. A swap was made, and the carpenter was able to create barrels now. The problem was he needed something to make the barrel stronger. He went to the people who were working on the iron. Swap upon swap, things were beginning to advance. They all knew that their God had told them not to bother each other, but without each other, nothing could be done. None was filling reams of paper with figures. Most of it, must be admitted, were meaningless. He wanted something to show his God, which should they ever require an accounting. Don saw innovations happening quickly. The baker had ovens, the builders had bricks, the blacksmith had forge, farmers had metal for their plows. Food increased, and because of that, the population increased. Don figured that they were now set for success thanks to his intervention. Now he would go on a tour of inspection and ensure all the other sections were progressing. Just on the point of leaving, he saw his innovators all talking together and was furious. "I told you not to bother each other. Get back to your own areas and get to work. If I catch you bothering innovators outside your vocation, I'll demote you to cleaning the pens for the animals." Do I make myself clear? The innovators were frustrated. They didn't want to stop talking because when they did, the new ideas came quick. But he was their God, and they must do as he directed. He called them back and blessed them with nautical knowledge. Their first voyage would be to seek out the group on Gladys's area and learn about explosives. He placed images in their minds of a mighty fleet of ships that they were going to have to build. When the time was right, he would give them the knowledge to make armaments. His area would become the force of power. It would control the seas first and lands after. Down left and the works of warfare began. All right, next one's on Ash, so we'll do that one in a couple of days. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here and appreciate you listening in. Hope you enjoy these. Hope you're interested enough to buy one or two. That'd be nice. So anyways, that's it for today. Hope you enjoy them. Look forward to seeing you again next time we do a reading. That'll probably be in about 3 or 4 days. So be good to yourself, and we'll talk to you on the next reading. Gotta stop eating those burritos. Have a good day. Be good. Bye.